Welcome to another episode of the Legacy Builders podcast. I'm your host, Kyle McGee. Super excited for today. Had this one circled for a while. Robert Rinke. Robert is the co-owner and broker of Levin Rinke Realty and managing partner of Levin Rinke Development. He started Levin Rinke Realty with the late Alan Levin, selling over $7 billion in real estate. $7 billion in real estate over the last 33 years and growing the business into the number one independent real estate brokerage in the region. For over 20 years, Robert has worked with local leaders in the county to improve the quality of life for locals and tourists, advocating for change that will enrich lives, improve the economy, and make the area a vibrant destination to live, work, and play. Welcome, Robert. How we doing?
Hey, good. Kyle, what an awesome day we've got.
Yeah, that's right.
You're adding podcast to your long list of career moves here at a ripe old age of, what is it?
31 tomorrow.
31. Good for you, Kyle.
Tomorrow. Yeah, no, this has been an awesome thing to do. My team, we've been talking about this for a year, and I said the only way I'm doing this is if my only role is the interview. Like I can't do the scheduling, can't do the production, but I'd love to interview successful people, and I'm learning a ton. So hopefully someone that's listening is getting some value from it. I wanted to start this by just sharing with anyone who's listening about the impact you've had on my career and show some gratitude and thankfulness. Like if there's one person outside my family that's had a greater impact on my career, we went in partnership shortly after I lost my dad in 2018. And I partnered with you and Reese on the spec homes, and we've had hundreds of lunches, and the impact and the mentorship that you've given me has, I think, been a huge part of a little bit of success I've had at an early age. So thank you. I appreciate you very much.
It's been lots of laughs.
Put Robert and Reese in a room together, and they are hysterical. So I'd like to start the conversation. This show's called Legacy Builders. What do you want your legacy to be defined as when you've made it to the end of your life?
I don't think, hopefully, my legacy would be the condos that I built. I hope that's not the legacy. They'll be around a while, and they were super fun, and we got super lucky with partners and timing and picking Pensacola Beach and all kinds of factors that allowed that to happen. Nothing is more important than your family. He had a great family, enjoyed his family, took enough time with his family. You know, I quit my first career out of college. I was with Dillard's Department Stores, and it took 20 people a year in our division of Dillard's, Little Rock, Arkansas division. They took 5 people from 4 different universities, and they put them in an executive development training program for a year. And then if you did well, you became a buyer, and I became a buyer. And then if you did well, become a store director, and I became a store director, and I got my second store quickly, and I moved very quickly through Dillard's. Fascinating career at that level in merchandising. As a buyer, you're spending $30, $40, $50 million a year watching the sell-throughs and reacting and having to come up with marketing plans and all kinds of, it's just fascinating retail at that level. You have the jet once a week, you jump on a private jet, you go visit the stores and all over in your marketplace. And I was getting ready to come back and be a divisional with Dillard's. And the best career move I made in my life that was a big job, and it paid a lot of money, and you got stock options, and it was a big job. And I was 29, and I had Reese, and I quit. I literally picked the phone up, called Mike Dillard, and resigned. Told him I couldn't take the position, and I was resigning. And my dad went to every football, baseball, and basketball practice, and I wanted to be able to do the same thing. So what we loved about Pensacola Beach, Abby and I had saved money, and we had a whopping $400,000, which was a lot of money to us that we had saved. And she's a physical therapist, made good money, and I made really good money with Dillard's. So we had saved that money, and that money would go, I'm from California. Grew up there, left when I was 19. So my goal was to get back to California, but with $400,000, you can't even buy a house in California for $400,000. So I said, Abby, we both want to be at the beach. We want to raise our kids at the beach. We both grew up. She grew up in South Florida. I grew up in Huntington Beach, California. And we wanted the beach for our family. And so we had been to Destin on spring break. My uncle took us. So said, let's do something in Destin. She loved that. So we drove down. Reese was, I think, 9 weeks old. And we drove down to Destin and put a contract in a condominium on the harbor. Had 2 weeks to get out of that contract, but we were driving back down Highway 98. Abby said, full on Pensacola Beach. We pulled on, and it was slow and a little bit beat up. And the old Maikai Hotel was burned out on the corner, and it was pretty rough. It was also so quaint, so charming. So it was on a little island, beach to bay kind of thing that we just, little Sabine Bay harbors. And so I said that to Abby. I said, I feel like I'm sick. I'm recalling sick for a couple of days. And we're going to stay on Pensacola Beach. And we just fell in love with Pensacola Beach, canceled our contract, got with a realtor. She was with JME Realty back at the time. And she gave us good advice, good realtor. She said, don't go buy your main home. There's a little auction at Bahama Bay at $32,000. Buy Bahama Bay and then move down here and figure out what you really want to do with your investment dollars. And she could have pushed me to spend all of her money and whatever, but she didn't. I had great respect for that from her. And anyway, that's what we did. We bought that little $32,000 condo, came back, put my house for sale. We were in my store, Dillard's was Jackson, Mississippi. We put the house on the market. And as soon as it sold, I resigned from Dillard's. My goal was to never work for anybody else again, because Dillard's put me into markets I didn't want to be, moving my family where I didn't want to be, working the hours that I didn't want to work. With Dillard's at that level, you're all in. So I wanted to control my own time. I knew I was going to work hard, but I was going to work on my terms. So to me, that was to be a lawyer. I always liked to debate. So that's what I was going to do. I was going to study this little market of Pensacola Beach. I was going to spend this $400,000 on a couple of investment properties. It was so cheap back then. And then I was going to commute and go to law school during the week in Tallahassee in the week after year. But what happened was I got involved in studying Pensacola Beach and became enamored with it. Well,
Eric, I want to stop you right there because I definitely want to go into the story, but before you go in that story, will you go a little bit deeper on this entrepreneurial itch you had? So you worked for Dillard's for 6 years out of college, but you kind of felt this urge. You had some money set aside. You felt this urge to want to work for yourself. Do you have any entrepreneurial background in your family?
Being an entrepreneur wasn't my goal. My goal was not to be controlled by anybody with my time and how much money. I mean, I made a lot of money for Dillard's. I was buyer of the year. I really was loving this career. But I always thought I need to figure out something to do on my own, because I'm going to make somebody a lot of money if I'm going to work this hard. And they're going to pay you a very small portion of that.
Yeah.
Money.
So it was a combination of controlling your time, being there for your family, showing up to all the kids' events, but you have a little kid, so controlling your time and then no cap on compensation. So control your own destiny, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought the law thing would do that. I just got to go to law school and I can be in business for myself and make that happen. So, yeah, I didn't have this big desire to. Now, I did grow up in California, and everybody made so much money on real estate. And I was back in the day when our little house in Huntington Beach went from $80,000 to $700,000 in like 6 years. Our little cabin in Big Bear went from, I don't know, it was like $90,000 and it went to 800, 900. Real estate is going crazy in California. So that was part of the draw. I saw everybody do so well in real estate, and I saw this beach and I thought, this just cannot stay this way. I mean, this is far prettier than cold water. And this is tropical paradise, and I just didn't think that it could stay like this. So I did see, once I got here, I did see a huge opportunity. And when I studied real estate to make this investment, I just got more and more excited about the opportunities that I thought Pensacola Beach held.
So you come over here kind of happenstance, right? You go off into Pensacola Beach and you're like, wow, this is beautiful, white sands, but run down. You see some potential. You bought a $32,000 condo, moved your family here. What was the first major project and how did it shape your outlook on real estate?
Well, what I was going to do is spend this $400,000 on income producing properties. You love those, don't you, Kyle?
I love them.
Kyle loves income producing property. So that was my goal. So I was studying it, talking to every realtor, told Abby, I'm going to take 6 months. I'm really going to study this before I take one shot at investing our money. What I found and loved about Pensacola Beach is that it has a true cap, a Department of Community Affairs, a DCA cap, which means the local county commissioners can't change that cap in case an act of Congress. And it's not going to happen because it's a barrier island and they're just not going to do that. So I found out that 18% of Pensacola Beach is developable. 17% had already been developed back then. There's less than 1% of Pensacola Beach that you can develop. I did understand getting a business theory, supply and demand, right? So I thought, good grief, this is just crazy that there's this few units ever to be developed on Pensacola Beach. This has to do well. This should do well. And so that's got me excited about it. And so then what happened, I was studying the beach, talking to everybody that would talk to me about the beach, every realtor that would talk to me, and every business owner. And Abby was being a physical therapist, and I was out talking to people about this. And then what happened was the Levins bought a resolution trust property, which is from the government, at the other end of the beach, at the east end of the beach, called the Palm Beach Club. It's the last development there going east before Fort Pickens. And those condos had sat there not quite finished. You know, sat there and deteriorated for about 7 years. So they were rough. A great design on the units, but they had to be considerably fixed back up. They came on the market and they were $79,000 and $84,000, depending on the unit. And when I got to that, and it went quickly, the units went quickly, there were 6 units left. So this was on Sunday. I saw in the paper that they were advertised for the first time. And I called the realtor that put the ad in the paper. And it was Sunday. She said, I'll meet you after church. We did. There were 6 units left. And I said, I'll take all 6. I knew I couldn't really afford 6, but I had 14 days to get out of this contract. And my plan was to go to Alan Levin and put my suit on, go to him with hat in hand and say, what I'd love to do, Mr. Levin, is put down 50% and buy these units and have the owner finance the other 50%. And he sat across that desk and said, you worked hard for that money you have saved. I really think you should buy one condo and not put all your eggs in one basket. I didn't like that answer. I was a little like Kyle McGee back then. You know, hard to take no for an answer. So I called a buddy of mine that when I was a pant buyer for Dillard's, he was a pant sales rep. So he was one of my vendors. And he was totally into real estate, good guy. So I knew he had a lot of experience with real estate, did apartments and different things. So I called him. He said, oh my gosh, you put contract on 6 condos. I don't want to see you lose your life savings. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to fly in. We're going to look at this. So his name was Gary Powell. Gary Powell flew in and he looked at our beach and looked at the units and he says, this appears to be a great value, but let's look at the markets to the east and the west and see what's going on. So we did, took a week and drove all over, and he did this price per square foot and got his rough analysis on it. And at the end of the trip, he said, I don't see you losing money here. I just sold an apartment building. I've got some cash. So we both went to see Mr. Alan Levin and sit down with him. And he said, here's my financial statement. I can do this for these 6 units. We're going to keep these 6 units. Anybody that doesn't go hard on their contract with the hard deposit, we'd like to pick up some more units. Can you call Robert? I'm leaving him with a bunch of blank checks to do that. So I got a bunch of phone calls and drove across that bridge a bunch. We wound up with 17 units at the Palm Beach Club. So I said, I don't need to go to law school. I need to focus on this, make sure these stay vacation rentals. So myself and another person opened up a little real estate company back then, and I was over the rentals because that's where my interests were. And she was over the brokerage. So furnished those condominiums, put an ad in about 10 different newspapers within like a 4-hour drive, 5-hour drive of Pensacola Beach, put a 1-800 place, and I sat down for a couple of months and took all those phone calls and booked all those rent, booked them up 100%. And I thought, man, this is the easiest business in the world. I need to open up a rental management company. And I found out later it's not the easiest business in the world, and I hated the rental management business.
Yeah, the hardest business in the world.
The hardest business in the world. Right. But anyway, so they went well, though, because we booked all of our condos, and I took on another 10 or something to manage. So I didn't have very many. I had, 27, 28 units to manage. But I kept them totally full because that was not a lot of units. And they did well. And we sold half of them that summer, and we made clear to like at least $50,000 a piece. So we had some money in the bank, and I said, no, I love this real estate thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to go to law school. And the boardwalk is where we had rented our real estate space from. And the boardwalk was back to the bank. It had gone under, and it was for sale. And so my buddy Gary Powell came in town, and he invested with me on Palm Beach Club. And I said, what do you think? I think we should buy the boardwalk. And he said, let's do that. So we had made that money. So it was an easy thing to put it right back into the boardwalk. So we did that, and really the beach turned around.
I want to stop you right there just for a minute. And what people that don't know Robert could take this hour and a half, and I couldn't ask one question. He's got so many stories, and he will tell them. So I got to stop because I want to go deeper on a couple things.
Yeah.
So how long did that Palm Beach Club project initial take? Was it a year, 2 years?
Yeah, they had to rebuild it, and it took probably 9 months to rebuild.
And then for you to rent them and sell off some of them.
It was probably a 2-year
total
that I was doing that. And I built up the rental company so fast. I built up to 125 units. I sent out a flyer with my first year's success percentages, which were really high. And then I spent that, after the season, that next fall and winter, building up the rental company. And we had like 125.
So it took 2 years. You didn't really know anything about real estate going in this, but then you're getting some confidence because you're in it every day. This is your full-time job. You've got all your skin in the game, right? So you're heavily invested in making this project work. And then you come across two guys, Alan Levin and Gary Powell. And because I know you, I know that these guys, you had relationships with your whole career for as long as they were living, basically. Was that by happenstance, or was that you intentional, you seeking them out and showing your value and showing that you were well studied? Or was that like God's luck just putting them in your life?
Well, no, I called Gary about the opportunity at the Palm Beach Club so he could give me advice. And we wound up being partners and we're great friends. And that went on until he passed away. And I cut him in later because I started with his money. So as I worked with Alan on different projects, I would give Gary Powell a piece of that, of my piece. And so he's remained a partner throughout Puerto Rico. Alan, I pursued Alan at first because he owned the Palm Beach Club, and I was trying to get on the financing. So I just worked with Alan. And then when the dust settled on the Palm Beach Club, we had sold most of our units, and we had the boardwalk, and the real estate company was doing extremely well. And I loved the real estate company. I didn't like the rentals, but I loved the real estate brokerage part of the business. And, I worked on the numbers, like a presentation about everybody should know. And I don't think they do it today. They should. Because the most important thing on Pensacola Beach is that 82% of it you can't build on. 18 you can, and it's almost all built. So I had maps for all our realtors, and we focused on the beach back then. And I remember the first year we did 12 million in volume or something. No, 25 million, I think, in volume my first year, I think was the number. But it was the highest number on the beach. So we started off, companies that have been here for years and years, we started off doing more business than everybody else. But I contribute that to, our numbers better. And we studied them, and we had meetings about them, and we had maps showing what can be the future of Pensacola Beach, and not all this development that you're going to see everywhere. A very low density, quaint, very unique beach. And we sold that through the real estate company.
What would you say, how valuable were those relationships being so early in your real estate career to your future?
Well, I would bug Alan about, look, it's time, because I'm boots on the ground every day, all day on Pensacola Beach in real estate. So I started bugging Alan, it's time for a condominium. We need to develop a condominium, or you need to develop a condominium, and I'd love to sell that. And then I started seeing and reading about lifestyle properties, and I would just bug Alan about single-family developments, but with nicer amenities, beautiful pools, gates, palm trees, decorative lighting, concrete streets instead of asphalt. And I kept telling him there's a market for something nicer than this. And so they had an interest in properties, and I would go to Alan, where La Caribe is where I have my home. And I would say, Alan, this needs to be a Caribbean-style neighborhood. There's one down in Destin. Take a look at Caribe and Destin, and this needs to be that. And Alan would say to me, he goes, well, Robert, because we had come out of a recession, right? I showed up in 91. It was still pretty rough. And he would say, if you can pre-sell this, I'll build it. So I would say, well, can we spend a little bit of money on a conceptual plan? So I have a conceptual plan. He goes, I'll spend a little bit of money on that. I would go to the architects with Alan and give my ideas, and we would get a conceptual plan. We did that at La Caribe, and we went out. We had a handful of realtors that worked for us, like 8 or 10 or something. And we went out, and I would do presentations on what we're going to put in this neighborhood, and we sold them quickly. We'd go back to Alan Levin, and they were pre-sold, and we got the attorneys, we got the paperwork, we got the deposits, and we did pre-sales because they wouldn't do it without it. They were very risk averse because the beach had kind of gone under way back in the day, like everything did at that point, real estate wise. So we did. We started off and we did La Caribe, and we sold those. And the day they were done, they were worth double what people had paid. And so people made really good money. It was important to Alan that people made money because that's how you build a career, right? You got to be successful for the beat.
That was your first new development. And your first new development, you weren't the developer. You were strictly the realtor.
That's right. And then I lived down in Palm Beach, lived in one of those units, and I had my big old car phone in my car. I had a Saab 900. I love that car. Ugliest car on the road, but I loved it. Alan Levin said it was the ugliest car on the road. So I would call Alan because where DeLuna Point is, where that property is. Yep. on the Intercoastal, down at the east end of the island, down the street from the Palm Beach Club. That property came for sale.
West end of the island.
West end of the island, correct. That property came available. So I immediately pulled over, called Alan from my car. I said, Alan, I called my office. They told me what it's listed for. I said, Alan, wouldn't the waterfront alone pay for this development? And you have the interior and the ocean or Gulf view lots. And he goes, I don't know, maybe. We'll look into it. But then another person on the beach, David Leatherwood, another realtor for another real estate company, called Alan. He was more savvy than me. He'd been doing this a long time. He was quicker. And he immediately tied the property up, and he went to the Levins. Right? Everybody would go to the Levins because they could afford to finance building, and they're good partners. So Alan, I called him back with more information. I'm getting ready to go do a contract. And Alan said, I'm sorry, Robert, but somebody beat you to it. I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like crushed. So then what they did is they packaged those lots, and they were selling them in threes. They wanted you to take an interior because the desirable was the waterfront. And they wanted you to take an interior and a Gulf view lot as a package of 3. And Alan was only doing this, they pre-sold. So they were having terrible success selling all 3, making you take 2 of something you didn't want so that you get something you did want, the waterfront. And I went to Alan and I said, that's a terrible idea. There's no amenities here. You're making people buy 3. Can we go to the architect and draw up some pool and security gate and make it nice and a common pier? And then can we sell the individual ones for even more than your package of 3? I'll price them higher, but they'll be individual. And he goes, well, let's try it. We have 2 weeks because I'm giving the property back after 2 more weeks. And so our real estate company and I went to all these presentations and did them, and we sold them all in like 8 days. And I came back with 100% sold in 8 days. I got Alan's attention on that one. This was like a 49 lot development, and they did very well on it. And then we did the same thing on the property on Navarre. And again, very heavy on amenities. It's Caribbean Isle on Navarre Beach. We have a sauna area. We had a hot tub, beautiful pool, a tennis court, gated frontage. We undulated and meandered the road so they weren't cookie cutters. We put some design into it. Again, concrete streets with some stamps along the edge, and it made it nice. I was in Navarre. Navarre was not hot back then. Navarre was pretty dead back then. We took our investors on Pensacola Beach that had made money every time. The same way on Duluth Point. The day it was done, they were worth about double of what people paid. So everybody's like, okay, what's next? So I said, Alan, I think we can sell the Navarre Beach if you do development nice enough. Really make it really cool. And we did. And the whole thing sold out. And nobody from Navarre bought them. It was all Pensacola. Group of doctors got wind of this, and they grew and grew. And those guys made a lot of money. Good for them. They were stepping out and taking the risk.
I want to make a quick distinction for people listening to this, because I think it's important to understand, like, you look, and I definitely want to get into the more legacy projects, the high rises that everyone sees. And the people that don't know your story might not realize, like, you didn't just start with a partnership with Levins and they opened the checkbook and you guys did all these things. Like, you added a ton of value, super aggressive, thought outside the box, like hustled, right, to make them money and provide value for them and build something until this next iteration of the story, right?
We did 3 of the single family subdivisions, and I was helping with the design and then doing the marketing and selling. They were the developers of those 3 developments. And it was really something. What happened was after that, so then what I started doing is working with Mr. Woodbury, talk about a courtly gentleman, awesome individual. And there was a piece of property that was vacant on Pensacola Beach, the Coral Rose, and it was beachfront in the core, and it's where Emerald Isle sits today. And I said, Alan, this is where the next condo needs to happen. I hadn't been a condo on Pensacola Beach since Tristan Towers, which the Levins developed. It had been like 15 years or something at that point. I said, I really think the demand is there for a new condominium. And Mr. Woodbury owns that. And Alan said, Robert, you're wasting your time. The Woodburys buy property and we'll sell property. And I said, well, I've got to try. So that's young and hungry, right? So I would drive over.
How old were you at this point?
I was probably like 31 at this point. And so I would drive across on break at their offices for M5. And I would sit out in Mr. Woodbury's lobby and be unannounced. And within 5-10 minutes, they'd call me in. And I'd sit there with Mr. Woodbury, tell him my background in California. And he was a Navy pilot and an officer and spent a lot of time in California. And his big insurance building is headquartered in California. So we talked about California, and we would talk about real estate, and we would talk about how great Pensacola is. We would talk about all this stuff, and he gave me real time, which was amazing, right? He was running a lot of businesses back then. And so I tell him my vision for that property, heavy amenities, beautiful resort amenities, fitness room, sauna, all Gulf front units. And they would say, I think about that, but I don't think I'm ready to. I'm in the banking business, I'm in the insurance business, I'm in the hotel business. I think I'm ready for the condominium development business. And I'd come back a month later and we'd talk about what's going on in the area. And I'd come back a month later and I'd come back a month later. Alan's shaking his head, you're wasting your time. And so one day, Mr. Woodbury, I've been there like 10 times at this point, and Mr. Woodbury said, Robert, what's that property worth? I said, Mr. Woodbury, I said, let me go back and do the latest analysis on that property. And can I get back to you in a week? He said, sure, take your time. And so I came back in a week. I didn't tell Alan about this, by the way. I was officing downtown in Fred Levin's building with Alan, and said, I'm just going to work on this and tell Alan if I get it. And then so I came back and I said, Mr. Woodward, I've got the numbers. Let me explain. I've got two different distinct numbers, but I want to make you understand them. So I'm going to start with the number that's too low. It's too low. And I start with that number, and it's $1.5 million. And I said, that's too low because I've got a pro forma that I've done, and I believe that this property can support $3 million for that. And I show him the pro forma, and he sits back in his chair, and he looks at me, and goes, Robert, I know what my property is. I thought, oh boy, he's going to be like $5 million or something that I can't consider. He goes, no, I've had 3 appraisals done on that since you've been talking to me right now. And he goes, it's not worth $3 million. So thinking, oh, here it comes. He goes, it's probably worth $1.5 million. Why don't you bring me a contract for $1.5 million? Because I don't need to be developing this, but I think you and Alan Levin need to be developing this. And the property is worth no more than $1.5 million. Not offered him $3 million, right? And I was going to go convince Alan Levin, hopefully, do my best. We could do this, right? And at $3 million, Mr. Woodbury would not consider that. Right? Talk about integrity. Oof, yeah, awesome.
That is an awesome story, and again, like it's so awesome to see retrospective, like looking back over your career, like how much and how important these relationships were between Powell, Alan Levin, Mr. Woodbury. Like so many people played a piece in this. So take us through, keep taking us through. So you go develop Emerald Isle, and then...
So I go back to the office. I'm officing with Alan, and he's at his desk, and I drop the contract, fully executed contract. I couldn't afford to build the condominium, but I could afford to buy the property. Okay.
Like you personally on your own?
Personally, I could buy the property. I could not build that $25 million back then, but I was going to buy the property. So I tied it up, gave the $50,000 deposit, and Mr. Woodbury gave us 120 days to do our due diligence. Pretty long due diligence period. And so I dropped the contract on Alan's desk, and he puts his glasses on, and he looks down at the contract, and looks up at me, looks down at the contract. He's in disbelief. And he looked at everything. Not a word was said. He looked at the whole contract for about 5 minutes. And he said, we've got to count him. Well, I said, Alan, I can't build the building, but I can buy this property. This is a good buy, a $1.5 million. We're not going to count her. Yeah, he says, oh, well, let me see your pro forma. And he gets those adding machine, and he does his thing for about 15 minutes, looks at the numbers, and he goes, I think you're right. I think we're going to set the contract. So we did, and we sold the condos really cheap. Back when the construction cost was so cheap back then, really, it was. Wish he was anywhere near that today. But anyway, we sold the condos.
This is late 90s?
No, this is 95. We sold them for $179,000. Yeah, the 2 bedrooms. And 3 bedrooms were $249,000. And they were nice. Beautiful pool with a bridge over, 2 pools, and a fitness center overlooking the pools, and a sauna.
This is the first high-rise condominium on Pensacola Beach, Emerald Isle?
No.
Oh, Tristan Towers.
Tristan Towers was there, and San Cici was over in there, and Regency was there, and different projects. But there hadn't been anything built in like 15, 20 years. So this was beachfront, and it was hot. They doubled in price. So people were selling them immediately for $300,000, $350,000, and they kept going from there. They went to $500,000, $600,000 pretty quick, and people made a lot of money. Good for them. And then what happened was it was so successful, and I knew the Levitts had this 40 acres at the other end of the beach, and I asked Alan, I said, and Fred, we had lunch, I said, can I start working on a vision plan for the 40 acres? And they said, sure. And I would take my wife and kids to Barnes & Noble at night, and I would read anything I could, right? There's so many different architectural magazines and different things. I would just go and get coffee, and we'd say for 2 or 3 hours. We would do that at least once a week. And so I did as much research as I could. I wrote a 12-page vision plan, and that was about amenities. It was all about amenities, lifestyle, health, fitness, relaxation, recreation, and adventure. So I was trying to incorporate this property. It was big enough to really put in the amenities. And I thought if you could really pour the amenities in first, we might have a shot of actually developing this big development, right? We're going to have demand. Right now, there's 5 towers, 765 units. We have the ability for 248 additional units, the last 248 units on the island. But if we were intensive enough and beautiful enough with the amenities, with this property that is so well positioned, with beachfront and the intercoastal abutting the national seashore, 12 miles of national seashore, nothing to be built on, we'd have a chance. So I did the 12-page vision plan. I finished it. I presented it to Alan. Alan said, let's run upstairs, and I want you to present this to Fred Levin. Now, remember, Fred Levin has no attention span. You got 15 minutes. You need to make it happen in 15 minutes. So I did. Went upstairs and took Fred through it, and Fred immediately said, this is it. It's the right time. This is the right development. This is the right concept. We're doing this. He was immediate. He said, here's what I want to request of you. Hire the best architect money can buy, and that has done resort condominiums. Nobody around here has done resort condominiums. I want you to do the best money can buy. That's my request. And then, so we started working on this. What we did on architects is I read about the way you should do this is to do a design charrette. And so what we did is we had the largest contractor in Florida, Turner Construction back at the time, give us the name of the top architects that do these level of developments. They're expensive. So we sent the packet proposal with the video of the beautiful aerial of the property to the 5. They all flew in Fred's office. Fred wanted to be a part of that. He would pop in and out of these meetings where we had it at his conference room in the law firm. Fred loved this whole concept. So we called it down to 2, our 2 favorite, and then we asked if they would do a design charrette. They agreed to it. We paid them $60,000 each partner, each piece, and they would come in together, and this was for 4 days. We put them up in a hotel, and then we meet at a conference room, and we would meet with them for 1 hour, and they would draw for 4 hours. They would bring their whole team in. Either we would meet for an hour, and they would draw for 4 hours, back and forth between the two. And so what happened at the very first meeting of the very first company, Adache was one of the companies we chose out of Fort Lauderdale. And he had picked the phone up and called his buddy, a land planner at Stone, EDSA and Associates, at Stone Associates, who does eco land planning. And they got so excited about this property surrounded by water in Florida. He flew his engineers in 3 days early. I didn't know this. And they did the whole land plan. And the architects did the rendering of the towers and the layouts of the units to take advantage of the views. In my vision plan, I said, we have beach to bay views. What percent? I'd like 100. I knew better, but actually look at the beach and the bay. Can you get these condos to look at both bodies of water? Well, the land planner was so good, EDSA, that he came up with a triangular-shaped building. I put in my land plan, can they be a football field apart? So we can sell that to people. They can visualize a football field apart so they're not on top of each other. So he worked it out where he staggered the buildings, and they were triangular-shaped buildings. I also said in the vision plan I wanted width, not shotgun, because everything on the Gulf Coast is long and narrow shotgun units to the water. This property was so wide that the Levins had that it allowed for these triangular-shaped buildings to get 7 out of 9 units per floor to look at the beach and the bay in double the amount of glass of the average condominium. So remember, we're allowed 23 feet of glass. Portofino 2-bedroom has 40 feet of glass. The 3-bedroom has 85 linear feet of glass. So we walked into the first meeting with EDSA and Adache, and they had these huge maps on the wall. They'd already done it. And they showed us this triangle-shaped building, double the amount of glass, and they had hundreds of arrows sheeting out from each unit, 3 different arrows, and they showed hundreds of these view planes. And we were just mesmerized. And we walked in, we spent an hour with them, we walked into the other company, great company, and we said, we're going to pay you guys your $60,000. We can't wait to start working today with their whole team. And they just looked at us and laughed. We paid them their $60,000, and we immediately went with Adache and EDSA, and it was an awesome design that they came up with.
Yeah, no, and it's super awesome for people that haven't heard that story to hear how it all comes together. And this is a 5 years in the making, or how much time did you spend in Barnes and Nobles, like coming up with this vision and like really dialing?
Probably did the Barnes and Nobles thing for about a year.
A solid year.
Took about a year for me to come up with the whole thing.
And this is something that you were passionate about.
I wasn't working on it full time for a year. I was really busy in the real estate business and working with Alan on other projects.
But this was a passion project, like from the beginning.
This was the big one.
This was the big one.
This piece of property is
irreplaceable.
It's dramatic. It's 100%. Irreplaceable. There's nothing like it.
Right. And well, you guys knocked it out of the park. I mean, that's kind of, I think, what Pensacola Beach and what people know is Portofino. And so you built Portofino without going too much.
Well, we got sued. We got sued to stop it. We weren't asking for any variances, none. We were allowed 30 units an acre with no variances. We were building proposing 27, no variances, no setback variances, nothing. But everybody has the right to sue. It's their right. And the best thing that ever happened to this project, Portofino, is that they sued. And so what happens is a group of people on the beach that were against it convinced somebody that had a lot of money on the beach to fund it. And they sued to stop Portofino. And it went on for 2.5 years. I held it up. But the great thing is that gave me time. I knew we had tremendous demand. We had 300 people with checks in that wanted this developed. I knew we were going to win. We weren't asking for any variances. And what happened during that time period is the real estate market on Pensacola Beach went up 50% in value. And the interest rates dropped dramatically to the lowest in my history. The interest on these buildings, when you're building these buildings, is a lot of money. It takes 2 years to build these buildings. Back in the day, these buildings were $35 million buildings. Today, they're $135 million, $150 million. But still, even at $35 million building, it's a lot of money in interest. So it dropped dramatically to less than 2%, something crazy low. So we were able to sell the condos for a little bit more money and still give people such a value that they're $100,000 under market. And then the interest rates went down. And it gave me so much time, Kyle, to nitpick the details of this project. I can't tell you. I drove Alan Levin crazy, walking into his office, showing him the latest thing. But it gave me all that time to really relook at floor plans and make fine-tuning adjustments, to relook at amenities and make fine-tuning adjustments. And the biggest adjustment we made was not fine-tuning. The most important adjustment we made during that time period was we went from an EFIS building, which is a lightweight steel stud exterior wall, gypsum board on foam, to concrete. So I kept going to Lauderdale to work with the architects, and I would see cranes in the air everywhere. And a third of the buildings I would see were all concrete exterior walls. And then I would see the EFIS, and I would walk those buildings. And I would come back looking at the best Miami has for amenities. I would do all of that. And so I'd come back and say, Alan, we've been hit by hurricanes, and concrete is so much more substantial. Look at that. And I would bug the architect, and the architect would say, Robert, it's overkill. These be code, they're great, they're not going to fall down, they're fine. But I kept bugging Alan. So Alan said, have your big meeting, get the architect, get the water intrusion consultant, get the structural engineer. Let's get everybody in a room. Let's just beat this horse to death and be done with it once and for all, one way or the other. So we get everybody in the room. We have the big meeting on concrete versus EFIS. Structural engineer starts off, the building's not going down with EFIS. It's fine. I got to go. The water intrusion consultant comes in and says, every building's going to leak. You have all windows, caulking around every window. There's fine movement in a building. You don't know when caulking fails. You get water intrusion behind these buildings. You get that water intrusion on a regular basis, and over time, it weakens the building. And then after a number of years of weakening, a storm comes along at that point, and it rips the ethos off of the building. You can't compare an all-concrete building because an all-concrete exterior wall, you put that waterproofing directly on the block, and then you chemically adhere that foam to that block. You can't get it off with a chisel. Water is going to get behind the system, but it's in concrete. It's not going to deteriorate your building. Alan looks at me, he hears all this stuff. He looks at me and he says, let's price it out with concrete. We priced it out as a change order with concrete. They have to re-engineer more pylons, deeper pylons to handle the additional weight. The building gets way beefier in every manner. More rebar, bigger rebar, higher test of concrete. Back then, it was like, 10% more to build the building, which was like $3.5 million more to build the building. We chose to do that. The real estate market went up. We could get a little bit more for the condos. And then we built all concrete and it turned out to be our number one selling feature. People love the fact of Portofino. They know that they can lock that door. They're going to come back to a building, and they may have some palm trees and they may have some whatever, but they're not going to have this structural damage. They're not going to have that ethos rip off that building and blow water in that building. You go all the way down. We had a building do that. Our first building was ethos. It's in Mobile. That happened. What happens is over time, that weakens every building. It meets code. It's a good building. I'm not hating on it, but it's just that you can afford to build out of all concrete instead of ethos. You're going to have far less maintenance on that building and far less risk on that building to do that. See, the best thing we did at Portofino, we get a lot of credit for the amenities, and they were spectacular. 8 pools, 8 hot tubs, restaurants, indoor pool, all that. But the best thing about Portofino is the way it's built with all concrete.
Certainly. And I think that, so this was kind of put you on the map, right? And you guys had hit a home run, got lucky in a sense with timing. It was in a really booming market, right? So you make a bunch of money in Portofino. I think that this is leading to some of the
We make a fair return.
Fair return. It's a massive project. So even a fair return on
no question.
A ton of units.
We own the real estate company, and then we had the development company, and then we're in the development. So
this is leading to what I think is probably the most important part of the story is you have all the success, and then you go into the next couple projects, and then we had this huge, once-in-a-lifetime, great financial crisis. So talk me through, what was the biggest challenge? I'm assuming that this was the biggest challenge in your career, and how did you overcome it?
So Portofino was going well. We had 5 buildings sold out. We were building Tower 4 and 5. We had closed out on Towers 1, 2, and 3. While we were being sued, before we got Portofino off the ground, we bought the property where Verandas is in Core, Pensacola Beach. It's one of my favorite developments ever. It's 2 units to the floor. Your mom lives there.
It's a great building.
It's a great building. So this property was there. It was old marina. And I said, Alan, what about a property with 2 units to the floor with elevators that open up into your foyer? So we got the architects, the doc, and they did a mock-up of that building. And we worked it out with the owner of that property where they were a partner in it. And it's just 36 units. It's not big. They're very nice units. They are through view units, right? Glass on both ends of the building with the elevator opening up into your private foyer. We did a bunch of sound deadening on that building because it's just right in the core. We actually filled all the concrete block with foam on that building, and we put in laminated glass on that building. That wasn't the code back then. We did that strictly for a sound abatement measure. So it's a very well built, very quiet, all concrete building with a beautiful elevated 60-foot pool and a fitness center. Again, amenities. We very much believed in in a lifestyle property. They were not just buying views, they were buying a lifestyle of health, fitness, relaxation, recreation. So that was very successful. It sold out right away, and we loved building that. And that was before Portofino because we were tied up in the courts at Portofino. And then what I did is I started working with Marilyn Woodbury and Mr. Woodbury's daughter. It was one of my favorite people ever, personally and in business-wise. She's a chip-off the old block of her dad. Started working with her on the Beach Club property. It's in the core. It's right there in the middle of Hotel Row where Emerald Isle is as well. And Marilyn, they're so funny. Alan Levin would joke all the time that the Woodburys are the only family in Pensacola that have so much money that they have 100% integrity. Well, nobody else has that kind of integrity because they don't have that kind of money. They have that kind of integrity. That was Alan's. But they're class family. They own insurance company, they own banks, they own hotels. They're very low key. They live in low key houses, nice houses, but regular houses, and drive a regular car. They're very down to earth people. And so Maryland, I would come to Maryland with, you have these 36 condos, low-rise condos right on the beach with a beautiful pool in the middle, 18 on each of the little not towers, they're three-story buildings. And there was a big piece of property behind it. I said, you could put a condo behind this with beautiful amenities on the ground floor. And I said, everybody would get to use them. The units, Maryland owned that property, and she owned on those condos, she owned 24 of the 36 units. So there was 12 other owners in that complex, and she rented her units. But I said, we could build these amenities that are just second to none. And everybody would enjoy the amenities, not blocking the view. The tower is behind it, up above it. She goes, I like that idea, but here's the thing, Robert. You have to get 100% vote on those 12 people. I said, well, Maryland, you can outvote them. You own 24 of the 36. She goes, I know, but I will not up. If it's good for everybody, it's a good project. If it's not good for everybody, we don't need the project. I said, good grief, I've got to convince everybody 100% to put a massive condominium. So we went to the architects, we drew the building. On the ground floor, there's an indoor pool, it's gorgeous. There's a fitness center, second to none, and there's a spa. I mean, a real spa, like wet rooms and relaxation areas. And it's 20,000 square feet of spa amenities with a beautiful courtyard out front, and then the beachfront pool, then the two towers. Started working with the owners, and we're like, we got to take your parking, but we're going to put a courtyard in, but we're going to give you garage parking, right? Garage parking on the beach is very expensive, and it's a big deal. Well, I'm not sure. I don't want to. What else you got? Well, we really want elevators. I said, you want me to put elevators in the two little buildings out front? Yes. We'll put elevators in the two buildings out front. But we give you parking in the garage, right? And put elevators in your building, and then give you all the amenities with no homeowners. Jeez. So Maryland, they want all these things. Well, Robert, that's what they want. So anyway, it was the biggest challenge development I've ever had. And that took about 2.5 years. And I won't mention his name, but he was a great guy. Local guy. He's passed away. He was the last holdout. I would go up to his business in Pensacola and in his office, and I'd say, look what you have here. Look at this beautiful courtyard. It's spectacular. You're going to have, and he had a double unit, so you're going to have 2 parking spaces in the garage, walking straight to a beautiful courtyard, pavers, landscaping, this gorgeous pool. Anyway, he just didn't like the concept of a 128 unit building. No, this wasn't. 92 unit building. He didn't like the concept of that. But finally, over time, and his kids work with him, and this is going to be okay. It's actually going to be better. And he took time for that to happen. And finally, at the last one, and his kids are the ones that convinced him that it was a good thing. And it was a good thing. It wound up being a beautiful development. Everybody won. But it was so hard because we built that building and the real estate crashed, came down, and it did. And so it was hard. So that was a hard building because the values came down on the beach, and we had to adjust that building a little bit, and we did. And 11 said, adjust the prices where people are okay. So it worked out because we were able to adjust the prices and make it turn out. We had made money elsewhere. We got to make money everywhere. One of those things. But yeah, you got to have the right timing. And that building was not the right time.
So you started it in, call it 2006 or 2007, and then you pre-sold the condos. So you had them pretty much sold. And then
it closed out in 2007.
Oh, they closed out in 2000.
They closed out in 2007.
So right when you were finishing,
it was already starting to get rough.
Yeah,
it got rougher. But the good news is the beach club is so high quality.
Yeah,
that it sailed through that, and they didn't dip like the rest of the beach. It was that high quality. So they dipped a little bit, but not much, and then they came roaring back. Like a lot of times, there's nothing for sale on beach club. Like today, I'm not sure that there's anything to sell.
Yeah, I don't think that there is.
Yeah.
And it is probably one of the nicest condos on the beach as far as just how it feels. Like you say, all the amenities, everything else. Talk to me a little bit about what you were doing on a day-to-day basis during this, because probably I'd imagine, I don't know this for certain, but a lot of your close friends or people in the development business around were going bankrupt or losing everything. Yeah. What was it like for you, like emotionally? How did you live with the fear of losing everything that you had done?
Look, I didn't deal with it well. No, I actually got ill.
Worried sick?
Yes, worried sick.
Yeah.
When you put your signature on one of those buildings, that's a problem if you have a problem.
Yeah.
And so the 11s were great. I went to them and said, look, I'm not doing great, and our clients aren't doing great. And they immediately said, we don't have to make money. You could adjust that building however you think you need to adjust that building. And I did. And everybody calmed down. One person had a problem. They sued us. They lost. Problem with all that is it takes a little bit of time. So they lost. And most of the people were very appreciative of how we handled it. And it turned out to be a very positive thing, but there was a time that it was negative.
What do you think got you out of that to keep going? Because a lot of people don't bounce back in those kind of instances. Was there anything you did personally that kind of helped kick you back into gear?
Well, I've always done a whole bunch of exercise to be able to manage stress. So everybody's got to manage your stress, right? You do it different ways. You can do healthy ways or unhealthy ways. So I've always pushed the running and paddling and lap swimming or whatever.
Yeah,
so
that's something that you
did a bunch of that. And we just focused on quality and treat people well. And we still did a bunch of business during that time, right? The real estate company was booming during that time. And so I had plenty to keep me positively occupied. We weren't building when all that happened, we weren't going to be building high rises anytime soon, right? So for the first time ever, I focused on Robert Rinke Realty. Back then, we were doing about $80 million a year in sales. And today, we're above $1 billion in sales. So I really threw myself into, once we got Beach Club settled and owners okay, and they were in good shape, the building was in good shape, I focused on Robert Rinke Realty for a number of years.
So let's talk about that now, because I think that, so you were predominantly in development, you still hustled and sold real estate, but it was a predominantly...
If the real estate company, very small on purpose, I had no time for it.
Yeah. And fast forward a little bit, I want to ask a couple questions around this. What's it been like for you to work so closely with your son the past decade or so? Reese has come on and kind of helped systemize and grow the real estate company and scale the real estate company. What has that meant to you personally to work so close with your son?
You mean losing control of my real estate company as he took over and makes me look bad? He'll say, Dad, we were at 80 million. Yeah. So Reese came in. I told Reese when he came in, supposed to kick him to the curb right out of college, not work for your family. You're supposed to go out in the real world, right, and take all those hard knocks and then come in 5-10 years later. But we didn't do that. Reese came straight from college, worked with us. And it's really helped me tremendously because I might have not been as enthusiastic to work as hard as I worked during all that time, but Reese really brought that fresh perspective and opportunity. And told Reese to come in slow, ease yourself in, don't come in as a hot shot, find an area that you can help. And that's what he did. He did a magnificent job. I know I'm biased saying that, but I think most people would say he's done a spectacular job. And so he started working in the marketing department. He did that for a couple of years and got good at that. And then he started working in the training area and going through all the videos and training and got involved in training, and he's been doing that for years. So I think it's been awesome, right? It's nothing but a blessing to work with your kids. So that's irreplaceable doing that. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome to watch too. And Reese is doing a killer job, and all the agents have tons of respect for him. And the lunches that I have with you guys are hysterical. What would you say the core values are that have driven the success of your career and business?
Well, you got to have integrity. And so we tell our agents all the time, realtors get a terrible reputation. Nationwide, we have a terrible reputation. It's like right down there with the used car salesman Gallup reporting, like 8% of the people trust their realtors to make them. So they don't think they're bad people. They're not bad people. They're great people. But do they trust that they really have the expertise? Do they really know and there's a lot to become good at to become a great realtor, right? You have to be able to value a piece of property accurately. If not, what good are you? You're not giving them good advice, right? So a lot of people get in this business and they don't do all this additional education. They don't spend several hours a week on educating themselves. And they want to get a listing. They want to know people, and it's a relationship thing. It's an expertise thing. So the biggest thing I think that differentiates us, and there's a lot of good realtors that work for all these other companies out there. I'm not saying that. But we do push really hard to continually educate yourself to a higher and higher level. You need to be a trusted advisor. Nobody wants to be sold a piece of real estate ever. They want you to know what questions to ask of them, to understand their lifestyle and their needs. They want you to know what market they need to be in with those needs. And then within that market, they need to know what's the best value and why. Can you take it down to the why? And make the process easy for the people and put them ultimately in the right products for them. It's a huge deal. So the realtors that really are good at that, they just crush it because they get so many repeats referrals. So to me, this is all about integrity. And if you don't have the skills that you have poured the time into, you don't have that level of business integrity. So that's really what we have stayed focused on. And on developments, we have stayed focused on over-delivering. We always pour the money into the details, or we don't do the development. We're just not going to do it if it's not going to add to the reputation. We still have 140 people or something that have checks in with us for years on the 12 acres. Because they want to be there. If we do that, they want to be there in line for those last 284 units, because they know if we do it, we're going to do it really right, or we're not going to do it. So that's super important.
So speaking of the 12 acres, the next question was going to be, what's next for you, where you're at in your career?
I would love to finish 14 of them, but
and so there's 2 more towers and space for an additional conference center or amenity center.
There's only 248 dwelling units left. So there's 153 units in each of these towers currently. So we can't build 2 of those. We don't have the units. So we can build Tower 6 with 153 units, and we've designed it, made them a little bit bigger kitchens and outdoor living rooms and some things that are really cool that makes them that much nicer. And then on the last building, Tower 7, we got like 84 units left that we can. So those have to be bigger units, or they'll have to be a combination of hotel units with smaller units. I just don't know on Tower 7, really. So, and right now, Florida has an insurance problem that I'm uncomfortable with. There's a cost of construction problem. It's extremely high, and I don't think that's ever coming down. So I think Tower 6 and 7 will get built. The good news is the existing values of Pensacola Beach are going upward. Vinos are selling for $700 a square foot. But to build the new tower, they're going to have to be in excess of $1,000 a foot to build all concrete the way we built this. But again, we're not that far away with the existing units that are 20 years old. So do I think today we could sell them for $1,000 a foot? I think today you can sell them. But I'm not comfortable with the banking situation because of the insurance situation. So until we know that we have insurance and banks are going to make loans on these units and these just sit and things will work out, there will be the right time. We're not only hurry. It could happen in 2 years or it could happen in 5 years, but not until it's safe and good for everybody.
And so there's no timetable set on that, right? It's just when it makes sense based off of the whole picture. And that's another thing that I've learned from you is you can't, and especially like a legacy type project like this, you can't rush that. Like it has to, all the cards have to line up. But I think that's something everyone has to look forward to because whenever that time comes, knows it's going to be first class. Speaking on the time frames, Pensacola and Pensacola Beach. Pensacola has changed drastically in the past, call it couple decades. What do you think Pensacola and Pensacola Beach looks like 10 years from now?
Well, I marvel at what the leaders downtown have done. We have nothing to do with that. But the developers and the leaders and everybody involved in what they've done to preserve downtown as this historic waterfront community. So what Pensacola has that's so unique to me is they have this incredible downtown waterfront, historic, top 10 streets in America, Palafox Street, just awesome. Combined with this barrier island, low density, 82% of it, you can't touch it. Very unique combination here. So when I take a look at 30A and I see these prices at $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 a square foot, we got a long way to go. I believe Pensacola is so inexpensive for the quality of life that it delivers. It's incredible what we have here. These downtown and this beach surrounded by those different bodies of water that we get to enjoy. It's world-class stuff. And I believe value-wise, we have a long way to go, and I think you're going to see further and further improvements downtown and on Pensacola Beach. But you're not going to see a lot of additional developments on Pensacola Beach. You're not going to see basically any, but a few hotels. There's a few more hotels that can be built and then 248 condos, which is nothing. So I see it being incredibly bright.
What do you think specifically has to happen to accelerate that? Because, well, we're starting to get some momentum, specifically downtown. Like you're seeing these larger apartment developments, larger things start to happen with the DC's doing a tremendous job, I think, as the mayor and very pro-business, and he's proactive, talking
well, they only allow quality downtown. Look what they do. Look at the way they light it up at Christmas. Look at every building that they approve or don't. They don't approve it unless it's first class. Developments happen downtown. They're all over it. I love it. So it's done correctly and it's accelerating itself. Pensacola Beach, they need to invest in the infrastructure. They just did a report from the Haas Center. This beach generates $2 billion a year in economic impact in Pensacola. They don't put any money back into the infrastructure. So this beach affects the value of every home throughout Escambia County. It needs to be landscaped. It's a small old beach. It wouldn't take anything to landscape it correctly and maintain that landscape. You need to have architectural guidelines. They need to have infrastructure. There needs to be some parking. These people in Pensacola that moved here, they want to come to their beach. It's their beach. They want to be able to park in the core. You know, you can do parking garages that are gorgeous. You pull into our beach, you don't see the beach. It looks like a big Walmart parking lot. You don't see any beach, right? There could be beautiful things leading you to a beach. I'm not suggesting you wall it in with a high rise. The EDSA was hired years ago for land planning. They said, don't do that. Keep those buildings at whatever level, not high rises, and do a bunch of landscaping.
It's always amazing to me at the pushback sometimes on like landscaping, like how that's such a low investment for such a high reward. Like
it is.
You do that at a home and it's like, oh my gosh, it's a transformation. Think about that, what that does to a median, to a whole the surrounding. Like I have never understood that.
raised our own lease fees at Portofino because they asked us to. And so we said, okay, we're going to do that, but we're going to put a fund in place so that Pensacola Beach gets some beautification. And we put that in place, and we were able to, with that fund, Portofino Island Improvement Fund, raising our own lease fees, we put in 3,500 palm trees on Dia de Luna. Is it perfect? No. 10% of them died like they said they would, yes, because they're not sprinkled, but 90% of them didn't die, and it's dramatically different, better. But Pensacola Beach Boulevard needs to be actually irrigated correctly and landscaped correctly. That's Pensacola Beach Boulevard. So there's money in that fund, that Portofino Island Improvement Fund. And so we're going to work with Ashley, the new county commissioner, and try to do Pensacola Beach Boulevard with $1 million in landscaping.
Yeah, and they're talking about taking away the toll booth and adding some landscaping to that. I meant like it would change the psychology of people coming onto the beach, and then it's a whole different clientele.
It's the reason they don't put the money in infrastructure is because around here we vote by district only. We don't vote at large. So all these other beach communities around us, they always put money in the beach first because it returns the most money back to the community. And Pensacola doesn't do that. We don't put any money into the beach. I mean, beach renourishment we do every 7 years because you have to. If you lose your beach,
you don't have anything.
They know what the economics are. They've got the hospital for it, right? You lose your beach, it's a couple $100 million a year investment. It's massive. A couple $1 billion a year in economic impact. It is what the report has. So infrastructure is what needs to happen. The infrastructure has happened downtown. They're making it happen downtown.
Right. Yeah. And this stuff takes time and takes energy, effort. But this has been a great conversation. I want to wrap it up. A couple questions. If you could go back and give your 30-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, when I first started out, I didn't always have the patience that I should have had. And I would have, like Reese came in a little easier. I might have should come in a little easier. So I was just needing to make things happen. Sometimes pushed a little too hard.
I said, what would you give yourself, not me? No.
We're not going to slow you down, Kyle.
Yeah.
That's not.
What is?
No slowing you down.
I wish sometimes because you are very conservative at this point in your life and career because you're at a different season. Not oftentimes, but like having this conversation, I wonder what it would be like interviewing you at 30 years old and how your mentality has shifted. Where were you at? You were aggressive and hungry and making shit happen, pushing buttons right in the...
Listen, I had to pursue every opportunity. I was determined to keep the business afloat, right? And so when you start off when brand new, it's a scramble. And so that's where you are in your career. And I see you scrambling hard, making things happen. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, just one day at a time. Last question. What's one book every entrepreneur should read?
How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie, I went through that when I was a Dillard store manager, store director. I asked the chairman, came to visit me in my store, and said, Mr. Fransby, can I, anyway, you would put me through Dale Carnegie training. And he goes, I went through Dale Carnegie training 30 years ago. He goes, yes, how much is it? I go, it's $800. This is a long time ago. He goes, yeah, you should do that. It's quick as possible. So How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie.
Great book. And you actually, what year was that? I guess one of the first years I worked at Robert Rinke, which I started in 2016, you put the agents through the Dale Carnegie training.
Yeah, we paid $1,700. I remember the number. It was a lot. We put 40 of you guys through that. But that was great training, wasn't it?
Oh, it was great training. And it was, I look back at it and it like helped me like in my communication and my confidence and so many things. And I think it's a great thing. So you paid it forward. Someone paid it forward for you. And then it just was a lot more pay, but you paid it forward for 40 of us. So that was great. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. But it's
another book that I read that I thought was interesting. It sounds a little goofy, but Dress for Success. Remember that book? Way back in the day, it was a very popular book. And so I was going to work with Dillard's in their management training program. So I needed to read that book, right? And so I read that book, and I remember telling Abby I'm going to put off getting married for 3 months. I will move in with my dad right after college. I'm working for Dillard's. I'm going to go buy a complete $5,000 business wardrobe. I'm going to dress as well as the Dillard's dress, right? Art Schefter and Mark, Kenway Hathaway shirts, Countess Mirror, the Art Schefter and Mark suits, and blah, 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 right? So I actually went, lived with my dad for 3 months and bought that. So, and even today, now, I don't dress for success.
No belt, no shoes.
I don't do it. But I'm not out there selling real estate. You see the Gary Michaels and Mark Lees and different realtors. I'll just pick on them because they're the highest volume around. They're dressed for it. Their car looks the part. They're wearing the nice jacket. It matters how you present yourself in the business world. If you're in the business world, and I'm not at this point, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does. And you told me that early. And I think that it not only does it help your reputation and how people see you, but it's a personal psychology thing to get you in the mode. Like, okay, I'm here to show up a certain way. And so it's like personal. It helps yourself just as much as it is outside looking in.
Realtors they've gotten away from that, but I don't think that bodes well for their income.
Yeah, no, I agree. What about, you gave me a book really early, Richest Man in Babylon?
Yeah, that was given to me by Gary Kyle. And that book is a quick read, and it's a biblically based book, and it just keeps repeating how you need to live. And I believe this. And Abby has done a tremendous job, my wife, of this. Living below your means. The happiest people live below them. And people think, oh, I can't live below my means. Well, maybe you can't, but most people actually could. And if they do that for a while and save, you're supposed to save a minimum of 10% of your income, then life becomes less and less stressful. And then, therefore, more and more fun. So we're big believers in that. We spend some money today, but until we were 50, we really didn't spend much money. We had to have it there for the businesses and for security in case a business were bad or whatever. But I believe that's a great book. And there's different books that say it different ways, but financial stress is terrible. And it makes you a terrible realtor because you have to sell something. It's tough.
And so I said last question. This is actually my last question. How has your faith intersected into your business and into your career?
Well, I've always had faith. Some people have a stronger faith. I wish I could tell you that, I don't get up every day and read my Bible. But I'll tell you one thing I did read early on in my career multiple times is Proverbs. And that's really a chapter in the Bible that repeatedly tells you what to look out for that's bad and negative and what you should be doing that's possible. Really how you should look at things and how you should live your life. So I have repeatedly read Proverbs. And I'll still go back every couple of years and read that. And if you can apply those to your life, you're going to be infinitely better off and more successful.
Yeah, and there's 31 chapters in Proverbs, so you just open it up to any day you're on, and it literally is the guide to how you live your life. So that's great advice. Well, great conversation. Appreciate you.
You have done such a good job. I can't wait to see where your career winds up. It's already been awesome to watch, and I know you're just getting started.
Yeah, appreciate it, and appreciate everyone listening, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good day.
Thanks a bunch.